I thought, do you know what? Let's get to the bottom of this, because you hear that word cyber attack a lot, don't you? You hear it bandied around. We've heard it the weekend. You've heard it before, and you kind of think, what is it? How is it going to affect me? Like, exactly what is it? Well, I've been speaking to David Horn, who is a director at CyberWhite. It's a digital security consultant based in the Northeast. And I started by asking him exactly what is a cyber attack.
It's anything to do with what you're doing online. And unfortunately, everything we do pretty much relies on connectivity and devices. So if anything that you're using becomes compromised and you're unable to continue to use that, then unfortunately you've been subject to some form of disruption, typically through some attack.
You might have seen recently on the TV the Undeclared War. It's all about what would happen in the event of a nationwide cyber attack.
At 9:07 this morning, we experienced a partial shutdown.
So it's a cyber attack.
Do we know who's responsible?
Russia, most likely FSB.
I'd like to know what we can do to retaliate.
If we attack them again, it's just an ever-escalating spiral. Surely it has to stop.
Simon Pegg is very good in the Undeclared War, but how realistic is that programme?
Well, it's a great question. It's actually incredibly realistic. The scenes and the underlying messaging is very much on point, and everything you see exists.
Wow. So the sort of stuff that people don't realise exist, what sort of things are they?
People compromising video surveillance footage, hiding malware within traditional software, but hiding it 2 layers down, so one layer can be identified, and then everyone breathes a sigh of relief, but doesn't spot the second layer, which can then go on to do additional damage.
In the Undeclared War, we see them targeting big organisations and trying to take down, countries and the world in a way. But for sort of like just you and me, sat in our home on a laptop, just surfing the internet or doing a bit of shopping, is it that big a deal?
Well, there are different motives, aren't there? And that's the key. You've got nation states causing disruption by proxy, using organised crime to give them plausible deniability, whilst they're kind of creating mischief and mayhem. And that's one motive. However, I just mentioned organised crime. Organised crime is exactly that. It's organised and it needs money. And that's where, as individuals, we get targeted with phishing emails, people trying to steal our identities, our credit card details, so they can be used for whatever nefarious purposes the organised crime gangs want, or maybe just to sell those IDs for other people to use.
My credit card details got stolen last year. They bought loads of pizzas with it. I had to ring up the bank and say, listen, this isn't me. And they were like, are you sure it's not you? Because you do buy a lot of pizza on a regular. And I was like, no, this generally isn't me. But I didn't really understand why they would do that, to be honest.
I just mentioned you get organised crime, but you also get people who do it because they can, and it's a bit of a giggle. It's probably that.
Now, you mentioned once you're on the internet, you're connected to the world, people can get into your computers and whatever else. As part of the Undeclared War, you see compromising video and things like that. Can people access your cameras on your phones and your laptops and stuff from somewhere else?
Yeah, very, very easily. But most of the time, it requires you to do something. So you would have to click a link or enable access for somebody to do that. I've
got a mate who used to stick black tape over his little camera on his laptop, and I used to laugh at him saying there's no way they can get the camera, but they can. Absolutely they can. In the same way mobile phones can be enabled remotely to turn into listening devices, that technology exists, and that's why you used to see many years ago when you could remove the batteries if people were having confidential conversations, they would have their phones on the table with the batteries off. Really? These days, obviously, we've got smart speakers and all that people have in their homes, which are always listening. Is that making cybercrime easier? Well, it can do. Again, it comes down to, as individuals, what we need to do to be aware. So one of the biggest things is people put all these devices onto their home networks, cameras or their speakers of whatever make they are, but they're hanging them onto a network on a router that most of them are using the out-of-the-box password and haven't changed it. So
by the very nature, their home network is insecure because they haven't bothered to change the password.
Well, I've got a router at home, and I know it came with a password. I had a little sticker on it and said, "This is your password." But it looks like quite a strong password. I'm guessing it's not. I should change that.
I would always change any out-of-the-box password, because what you don't know is, all you need is a disaffected employee at the manufacturer of that router or whatever it is. They just upload them to a site on the dark web, and then people just bang away at them. Or alternatively, they're not difficult to crack, because normally they're probably about 10 characters long, and they'll just be letters and numbers. They rarely, if ever, use special characters like ampersands or dollar signs or percent signs. And those sort of characters make things much more difficult to crack.
Well, on the topic of passwords then, because obviously, people have a lot of online accounts these days. It can get a bit of a struggle remembering passwords. I've got 2 questions on this. One, should you go on and make sure all your passwords are different and make sure that they're really hard to get and don't have any normal words in or anything?
No. We've all got multiple applications. If you try and have a different password for everything, you're going to spend your life either writing them down, which is not a good thing, or resetting them because you just won't remember them. So it's far better to have one really strong password that is not something that, may not be your mother's maiden name or your pet's name or the name of your favorite band, but use something that might be 3 or 4 words that are not connected, or a line from your favorite song, or a line from your favorite poem, something that people would not associate with you, and therefore it becomes much more difficult to guess, then intersperse it with some special characters.
Right, so actually just one password will suffice as long as it's strong enough.
Yeah, and of course what you can do as well, there are sites you can go to and enter your email addresses and details, and it will tell you if your password has been compromised associated with that account. So it's very easy for you to check to see if your password's robust.
Right, okay. What are those websites?
So the one that most people would use is one called Have I Been Pawned, and but pawned spelled P-W-N-E-D. So if someone types in it, "Have I been pawned?" P-W-N-E-D,
yeah, and
then you can enter your details, and lo and behold, it'll give you all the information that it knows on your particular email address.
Right, okay. I'm going to do that in just a second, Dave, while I'm asking this next question, because my other question was, like, my phone and my laptop remember all the passwords for different accounts, so I never have to put them in. I just scan my little finger or whatever, and it does it all. But is that more dangerous? Because if someone managed to hack my phone or my laptop, they'd get every password that I own.
Well, again, it depends how you access your laptop. If you just turn it on and you're in, then that's not so good. If you turn it on and you have to then authenticate to get onto it with either your fingerprint, or if you're entering your username and password, or even better still, you're using some form of multi-factor authentication, like Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator, whatever it is, then it becomes much more difficult for anybody to access that information. Well,
that's good. There's like a little finger scanner on it, so it's not just straight open. Now, David, while you were just answering that, I've gone on Have I Been Pawned, PWNED.com, and I put my regular email address that I use for loads, 17 data breaches.
There you go. I think you're going to be busy later.
I mean, I know this is on a small scale. How worried should we be on, like, a grand scale, on the scale of the Undeclared War that we've been seeing on the TV?
Well, my real advice on this is that, like anything, we shouldn't become obsessed with it, because that's not healthy, right? But we should just be vigilant in the same way when we're walking down the street. If we're going to cross the road, we're going to be careful, right? We're going to look left, right. We're going to make sure it's safe. And then we just need to apply that same sort of logic in our personal lives. Make sure that you're doing all the good things. You're keeping your software up to date on your machine. That's just common best practice. Don't be clicking links from unknown or untrusted sources. And if all else fails, make sure you've backed up your data, because at least you've got some recourse to get it back. So none of that's kind of really difficult stuff to follow. But if everybody does that, it just makes it so much more difficult for the bad guys to get where they need to get. We're always one step behind the bad guys. We're always playing catch up. So I just think it's going to continue on, and we'll just keep chasing and trying to defend and try to get that one step ahead. But of course, we've got to remember, they only need to get lucky once. We've got to be lucky all the time. What the main thing is, as we saw in the Undeclared War. It's about creating unrest. It's about depriving citizens of the ability to function, which then creates that civil unrest. And then, as we saw in the Undeclared War, that kind of activity is supported with kind of the use of deep fakes and misinformation, which then kind of perpetuates that and creates an environment of huge mistrust. It's like everything, things can be used for good and things can be used for bad, and that's a challenge, isn't it? Whatever you develop, there's always an opposite side to it.
On the TV show, Simon Pegg, when he came out and said, look, you need to take this for real. This is like any war. This is like any physical war that you've seen happening, the sort of unrest and the problems that it can cause in a country.
Well, that's right. So, historically, you had 3 theatres of war: land, sea, and air. It then expanded to include space as a 4th theatre, and now the 5th is cyber. And I think that is the key. And in fact, GCHQ now have offensive cyber capability, which is something that until a year or 2 back just didn't exist. We were always defensive, but now we have the ability to be offensive.
God. David, I'd love to say it's been really nice to chat to you this morning. But, I've been hacked. But I'm guessing what you would say is, look, it's nothing to stress about. If someone is listening to this chat and going, right, I'm switching everything off now, I'm going to just sit in the dark and not do anything for the rest of my life, there's no need to do that. You can keep yourself safe.
Absolutely. Don't turn everything off, because then they win. Carry on doing what you do. Just be mindful. Just think before you click, and make sure you're using the latest software and you're doing your updates, and make sure you keep your passwords strong.
That's David Horn from CyberWhite there, talking to me all about hacking and cyber attacks. And that website